With polls closing in an hour, Egyptians continue casting ballots on the second and final day of the second phase of the 2025 House of Representatives elections. Across 73 constituencies and more than 5,200 polling stations, voters are selecting from 1,316 candidates for individual seats, alongside party lists in the Cairo, South and Central Delta and East Delta regions. Women and elderly voters across Egypt's governorates showed strong turnout on the second day of the second phase of the 2025 parliamentary elections. Polling stations reported high turnout as citizens continued to cast their ballots in the second phase of the vote. Egypt's National Council for Human Rights, NCHR, has activated its Central Operations Room to monitor the second day of voting in the second phase of the 2025 House of Representatives elections. The room oversees field teams, handles real-time observations, addresses challenges, and provides technical and logistical support to ensure a transparent and impartial electoral process. The NCHR said that its continued monitoring aims to uphold democratic principles and protect voters' rights. For further analysis, we're joined from Cairo by the managing editor of Al Ahram newspaper, Mr. Ashraf Al Ashri. Welcome to Q News, sir. Now, how has Akhbar Al Yom been covering the second phase of the elections, and what narratives or trends have emerged across the 13 participating governorates?
Of course, the elections, the second phase of the elections had lots of changes than the first phase, and we saw a higher turnout trend, and we've seen yesterday and today the number of people queuing to cast their votes, and the NEA is supervising everything closely, and they have actually considered lots of mechanisms and made sure to implement lots of measures and to take lots of measures to ensure that everything is going so smoothly. We've seen in the first phase around 17 polling stations or districts were actually cancelled and will have a rerun, but this isn't happening here in the second phase. And so here in the second phase, there is a spirit of competition, positive competition, because there is already transparency and good supervision by the NEA, so that they can allow everyone to practice their constitutional rights. And yeah, people were very positive today. The atmosphere was very positive, and people were really enthusiastic to cast their votes. Once they arrive at the polling stations, people were very cheerful, and they're more aware, and even the government authorities have prevented any violations from happening in front of the polling stations, and this was actually very, very important, so that everyone can get or practice their constitutional right and can cast their vote. And so this is, as I said, very positive, and so the national community actually lived up to their role.
Mm-hmm. And from your own editorial perspective, what distinguishes this phase, spanning 73 districts and more than 1,300 individual candidates, from previous parliamentary elections?
This phase actually, we saw here, they implemented the law fully and they made sure that there were no violations whatsoever. And the NEA put lots of new measures and even tools to facilitate things for the voters and even the candidates, and to make sure that the electoral process is going so smoothly, and so everyone actually learned from the first phase, and we haven't seen any violations, except for maybe two, and they were dealt with immediately with dignity and grace. And so this phase here is handled with so much integrity and transparency, and also all the state institutions have violated any kind of violations, even in campaigning. We've seen some candidates actually violate the campaigning rules, and they were dealt with immediately also. And the law was implemented here, and so this is why this second phase is very different. And I think that there is a very high competition between the candidates, because the voters are now more aware of how to choose who to represent them in the next parliament. As you know, this upcoming parliament is very, very important to draw a roadmap for Egypt on how to deal with the regional challenges and internal challenges even. And so here, they were actually betting their money to come out with transparent elections that are, as I said, full of integrity and have no violations whatsoever, to allow the candidates to have their chance, and to allow the voters to choose who to represent them in the parliament.
And how would you assess public engagement based on your newspaper's field reporting from major governorates like Cairo, Dakhla, and Sharqiya?
I think that Cairo and the bigger cities had a high turnout rate. I've seen for myself, and I also followed up with the media. And as I said, there is a very high turnout rate, and Cairo is the capital here, and there was better organization here, and they had also a larger number of voters, and it had all the tools necessary and all the measures to facilitate the electoral process. I think that everything that the NEA has done to prevent any kind of violations, and so yes, everything was successful here in the second phase. We've seen in Dakhla and in Cairo, and they were they had a large number of voters, and people were very keen there to go and cast their votes. There was also close monitoring and supervision to make sure there are no violations, and in a way that would honor this second phase and would honor these elections, and it actually pushed the Egyptians to go and vote, and we have had a higher turnout rate than even the first day. People have seen the changes that have happened and are very trusting in the government and in the elections now, and this is what encouraged the people to go and cast their votes after they saw the transparency. And I think that this will be praised later, and they will learn from everything that has happened in the first phase and the second phase. And so, as I said, all of this encouraged the people to go and cast their votes and to practice their constitutional rights in elections that has this much transparency and integrity. And they've also sent lots of ballot boxes as well.
What feedback or concerns have voters conveyed to your reporters, especially regarding, of course, accessibility, organization, the overall voting experience?
Of course, there is very great organization here when it comes to the second phase of the elections. And so, yeah, there weren't really complaints except for a few, and they actually received immediate response, and the state institutions helped them. And so, yes, the polling stations open on time, and everything is going really well There is high security as well, and this is also all because of the President El Sisi's remarks to make sure that everything is going with integrity. And so here for the voters and the candidates, they have actually interacted positively now, and President El Sisi, we've seen him confirm the need to choose the best people for this job to represent the Egyptians and to grant them their rights. And so, yes, everything that we've seen today, we've seen the NE learned from the first phase, and organization now is exceptional. And so, this actually led to the NEA severe punishments and immediate ones in case of any violations. And so yes, as we you can see now, all the voters are actually very satisfied with how things are going. Everyone is praising the organization and all the measures that the NEA has taken.
Mhm. Well, from Cairo, that was Mr. Ashraf Al Ashri, the managing editor of Al Ahram newspaper. Thank you so much for joining us on Q News. Moving on, Egypt's Ministry of Parliamentary, Legal and Political Communication Affairs has shared detailed information to educate the voters on the vote counting process during the second and final day of the 2025 House of Representatives elections second phase. The guidance covered procedures for counting votes, the National Election Authority's supervisory powers, candidates' rights and responsibilities, methods for aggregating ballots, and the steps leading to the announcement of the final results. Minister Mahmoud Fawzi emphasized that providing clear and accurate information helps citizens understand their rights and participate in the electoral process knowledgeably. Day 2 of Phase 2 voting is now underway in Egypt's 2025 House of Representatives elections, with polling open across 13 governorates and thousands of subcommittees receiving voters as the process moves towards counting and the appeal stage. To continue our special coverage, we're joined from Cairo by the Professor of Constitutional Law and former Deputy Prime Minister, Mr. Abdullah Al Mughazi. Welcome to Q News. Professor Mughazi, from a constitutional perspective, how do you assess the conduct of the second phase of the 2025 parliamentary elections across the 13 governorates?
My evaluation is very positive, actually, because there are lots of measures that the NEA has taken, and so things were going more smoothly, and also we implemented the law more, and most of the candidates and the parties complied more to the laws, and so the 13 governorates in the second phase. And we had actually one of the largest city in Egypt, like Cairo, Sharqiya, and the Kahliya, all of these governorates with their large numbers of voters. We had a very few a number of violations, that were presented to the NEA, or the complaints that were filed to the Ministry of Interior Affairs. And so here this is very positive. And the second phase is of course the second phase is of course better than the first one. The first one saw lots of problems and complaints and so on, and this led to canceling lots of districts.
Mhm. And how effectively does the current electoral system, combining individual seats and a list system, reflect the constitutional principles of fair representation and political pluralism?
Of course, the Egyptian constitution allows individual candidacy, and also through the lists. And maybe using the lists here is because the Egyptian constitution wanted to make sure to represent people who weren't represented before, like women, Christians, youth, people, Egyptians abroad, people with special needs, workers, and farmers. And so this is why we needed a large number of seats for the women, around 25% of the seats. And this is actually very positive, and this led to a high turnout from the women, either candidates or even voters. And then also using lists, I think that it is positive up till now. But in the next time, after 5 years, we need to think about not about eliminating any discrimination. We've seen lots of parties being favored for more than 10 years, and so these parties now and these classes, they presented themselves to the Egyptians, and the Egyptians love them now and support them, and so they got their votes. Basically, and so everyone needs to be equal in the upcoming elections. But for now, I think, or we think here, that the discrimination that's happening is actually positive, but it cannot keep happening for a long period of time. After a specific period of time, everyone needs to be equal when it comes to rights and duties, and so we cannot discriminate anyone or any parties or favor any parties. This could be 5 years from now, or 10 years from now, but this needs to stop someday. We cannot have any discrimination or any favoring.
Sir, with more than 1,300 individual candidates competing in this phase, what constitutional mechanisms ensure equal opportunities and prevent electoral imbalance in heavily contested districts?
Of course, the voters here, or the authorities also were keen to make sure that everyone was equal, and no one should be favored except for those who were favored by the constitution itself. And so everyone has the right to run as a candidate, and the state will be supporting all of them, because Egypt wants to make sure that everyone has the same chance, and for everyone to be equal. And this is what all the international institutions, the governmental and non-governmental ones, they have praised the electoral process here in Egypt. And so we can say that people are getting equal chances. And if there were some violations, very few violations actually, or some people used what's called political money or bribes, these are actually very minor violations that the country has nothing to do with. And to prove this is when there were some violations by some of the candidates, when they were bribing voters, they were actually arrested. And so this shows that the Egyptian government is very serious when it comes to the electoral process, and that they support all the candidates equally, either they are parties or individual candidates. And so I think that the Egyptian government, they keep getting better with the elections, and they learn from their previous mistakes, and they have stable and confident steps to work towards democracy.
Professor, the law guarantees representation for women, persons with disabilities, and also Egyptians abroad. So in your own view, how well is this principle being translated into practice in this election round?
The Egyptian constitution is still making sure making sure that we cannot have anything but positive discrimination, because at some point the number of women in the parliament was actually very small. There were around 9 or 10 women only, and so the Egyptian constitution wanted to make sure to empower women and to make sure that they have a role in the Egyptian government. And so this is why they said they cannot have less than 25% of the seats designated to women and youth, people abroad, and the Christians also. And so we're talking about categories of classes here that were almost or almost didn't participate in the constitution or in the parliament, but now they can represent themselves. And of course, on top of the list is women and youth, Christians, and people with special needs, and the Egyptians abroad. And actually, the Egyptians abroad couldn't cast their votes at all in embassies, or they didn't even have someone to represent them in the parliament. And so according to the Egyptian constitution now, the Egyptians abroad can choose who to represent them in the parliament, and they have the right to choose whoever in all embassies around the world. And this is a very positive step here that shows that Egypt really cares about its people, and they care that everyone is practicing their constitutional rights, and that every category has someone to represent them. And we didn't see this before the 30th of June demonstration or the 2011.
Sir, what constitutional safeguards govern the work of the electoral committees and the judiciary supervising the 5,287 polling stations? Were these safeguards visible during this phase?
Of course, there are a lot of guarantees that allowed equality to happen between the voters. We have a national authority that is made up of judicials for the major part, and then also we have the judges and most of them, and they have a very good reputation actually. And then also they have a right to appeal if they think that they're not that satisfied with the number. And we've seen appeals after the first phase, and so the NEA actually cancelled lots of districts after looking through these complaints. And also, if the NEA didn't respond to them or take it seriously, then the candidate, as long as they have appeal, then they can go to the higher administrative court. And tomorrow we actually have a decision about one of the appeals and the complaints. And so here Egypt was very keen to make sure that everyone got the right, the candidate, and you have the right to go to the internal justice. So yes, if they appeal, if they're not satisfied with the appeal or it wasn't looked through, then they can go to even higher. They can go to the Supreme Court in Egypt. And so this makes the voters and the candidates trust the electoral process, and they are sure that the NEA will take the necessary measures in case of any violations or appeals. And so this made the people trust the NEA and the Egyptian government that everything is being dealt with according to the law.
Well, from Cairo, that was Professor Abdallah Al-Moghazi, Professor of Constitutional Law and former Deputy Prime Minister. Thank you so much, Professor, for joining us here on Q News. Egypt's Supreme Administrative Court is set to issue its ruling on 259 appeals challenging first-round results in the 2025 House of Representatives elections. The First Circuit of the Supreme Administrative Court is due to deliver its verdict on Wednesday after reviewing all 259 appeals, hearing defense arguments, and examining the submitted documents and legal briefs. The challenges were filed by candidates or their representatives and other parties with legal standing. Requests in the appeals range from annulment of voting in specific constituencies to cancelling runoff rounds to suspending the announcement of results over alleged irregularities in counting and aggregation. One appeal seeks to halt the entire first phase process, while another calls for overturning a declared list victory. Egypt's National Election Authority says that it is monitoring the second and final day of voting, with operations head Judge Ahmed El Binderi checking polling stations via video conference. Judge Ahmed Binderi, who heads the authority's Central Operations Room, held a video conference with the heads of the general committees and also to follow-up committees to brief the public on the voting process and the opening of polling stations on the final day of balloting. The Central Operations Room is also receiving updates from follow-up committees heads in governorates to confirm that procedures are running smoothly and that all polling stations have opened and are operating as scheduled. International Coalition for Integrity Observers has said that the second phase of Egypt's 2025 parliamentary elections began smoothly, highlighting strong turnout among youth, women, and older voters. They reported no campaigning outside polling stations and praised orderly procedures and professional facilitation across multiple governorates. Coalition officials described early impressions as pointing to one of the most inclusive votes yet, with observers from Greece, Uganda, and China commending the organization, voter assistance, and accessibility measures. Egypt's National Council for Human Rights Chair Mahmoud Karam has said that the council is monitoring the 2025 parliamentary elections with complete neutrality and objectivity, emphasizing the need for free and fair voting. The NCHR has activated its Central Operations Room and deployed field teams nationwide to track the second phase of the polls, address any violations, and ensure a safe voting environment. The NCHR said that its mechanism follows transparency standards and documents all observations for the prompt action. For further analysis, we're joined from Cairo by the head of the editor-in-chief of Akhbar al-Yom newspaper, Mr. Mahmoud Bassiouni. Welcome to Q News. Mr. Bassiouni, how has Akhbar al-Yom been covering the second phase of the elections, and what narratives or trends have emerged across the 13 participating governorates?
Of course. Hello. Here, of course, we covered a large number of districts in more than 13 governorates. The second, we covered the second phase of the House of Representatives elections. Everything was going very smoothly since the early hours of morning. There was a high turnout rate, especially today because it is the identifying day here in the electoral process. There is competitiveness between the candidates and the parties that have participated in these elections, and of course we have seen we've seen footage of youth and women participating, people with special needs as well, and also we have seen international monitors and national monitors to supervise the electoral process, and also even the Human Rights Council, and they have a central room to supervise the elections in all governorates, and all of these institutions and organizations actually released statements about the details about what they've seen here in the second day of the second phase of the House of Representatives elections.
And from your own editorial perspective, what distinguishes this phase, spanning 73 districts and more than 1,300 individual candidates, from previous parliamentary elections?
A competitiveness basically, and everyone is competing, and it is positive actually. But yeah, we've seen a few candidates violating the rules, even though the NEA has warned more than once about this. And so yes, here the parliament, we have each seat actually has like 30 or 40 candidates, and so this is a very large number of parties or individual candidates. And so here, as I said, competition is the title of this phase, or we can also say high turnout. So this was also the highlight of this phase. We have already seen a large number of voters in front of polling stations since the early hours of the morning today, and we also see a high turnout rate in the last hours.
Speaking of high turnout, we have seen high turnout by women. How would you assess public engagement based on your newspaper's field reporting from major governorates like Cairo, Dakhiliyah, and Sharqiyah?
Of course, women participating. Actually, since the 30th of June demonstration, women have been participating in all the constitutional roles, and so women are now empowered in Egypt, and the women are a part of the Egyptian scene now. When it comes to actually, we have a large number of female candidates and a large number of female voters, and so women are actively participating in the electoral process and the democratic life in Egypt, and are trying to play a role politically in the Egyptian government, or as candidates and members in the Egyptian parliament, or even as voters. We have seen large number of female voters in all of the governorates over this year in the House of Senators or House of Representatives elections.
Mm-hmm. Media outlets, sir, play a major role in shaping voter awareness. How did Akhbar al-Yawm ensure accurate, balanced, and comprehensive reporting throughout the two voting days?
Actually, Akhbar al-Yawm have supported all the candidates, and as such an honored platform here, we have complied to the NEA rules. They have actually released rules about how the media is going to handle the election, and we have strictly complied to them, and we also made sure we were neutral and that all the parties and individual candidates got equal opportunities and equal chances. And also we took measures to make sure that everything is going with transparency and integrity according to the international standards. We have here journalists that are trained for such coverage, and through them and we and so we are trying in every way we can to have a transparent coverage when dealing with all candidates and parties, so that everyone can get equal chances. And so this is how we handle it.
What insights have your correspondents shared about the performance and preparedness of the 5,287 polling stations operating from morning until the evening?
I think that all the correspondents and the reporters that took part in the electoral process today, they all agree that there is a huge difference here in the second phase. Lots of candidates in the second phase have removed all the campaigning posters from in front of the polling stations, and so anyone who had any pictures or anything to identify them, they have removed all these pictures and posters that violate or that are electoral violations, and with the important role that the security has done, and also the Ministry of Interior. They've been playing such a huge role also in maintaining security, and played a huge role in the electoral process, and they have actually arrested candidates that try to influence the voters' opinion and choice. And so yes, they were arrested and are being dealt with and under investigation actually now. And there were data released on the Ministry of Interior's page, social media page, and so this all contributed to this actually contributed to the huge progress that we can see in the second phase here, and the participation, higher participation from the voter side. And so yes, anyone who tried to influence the people has actually learned this lesson now, and this gave the voters such trust in the government, and that everything is being handled with transparency and integrity, and that there will be no violations whatsoever, especially those that were happening in front of the polling station.
Sir, as we are watching live scenes from across the entire country, polling stations across the country, we have seen high turnout by women, youth, and also the elderly. How do you see this, and how do you see families who were keen to bring their children to the polling stations to educate them about the electoral process?
This is something that we have been seeing for a while now, because it has some kind of a positive spirit when it comes to the Egyptian government, towards the Egyptian people. And so we've seen this more than once in the elections and the electoral process. We've seen people taking their children who are not yet eligible to vote to know more about the electoral process and to see how everything is going, and to get used to the electoral atmosphere. Even if they will just wait outside and not enter the actual polling station. And so this actually pushes and encourages the new generations to participate politically when they are eligible to do so. And so it is very positive, and it is such a positive indicator about the elections and about the spirit of the voters.
Or from Cairo, that was Mr. Mahmoud Bassiouni, the head of the editor-in-chief of Akhbar al-Yom newspaper. Thank you so much for joining us on Qnews. The National Elections Authority, as the Egyptians wrap up the second day of voting, said that attention shifts to securing ballots, transparent counting, and the official compilation of results. This election is about representation and shaping the next 5 years of governance. And that's all for our coverage for now. I'm Hala Al-Hamalawi. Thank you so much for joining us.